The Nerdy Thirties, the podcast that proves you don't have to give up what you love at any certain age.
Hi guys, welcome to the Nerdy Thirties, and we have a special treat for you today. We have got Flint from G.I. Joe himself.
And the voice of every commercial ever.
Every single commercial in the world. Mr. Bill Ratner. Isn't he lovely? Just look at this.
Buried and exhumed Flint more times than I've been buried and exhumed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, this is 35 years ago. And I got a call from Lady J, my friend Mary McDonald Lewis.
Yeah.
Who said, "You want to go to the G.I. Joe Con, the Hasbro thing in Indianapolis?" And I went, "What's that?" She said, "Go online, idiot."
Yeah.
And I had no idea. I mean, I still do voiceovers, and
Right.
I don't want to tick off my clients by leaving and going to do things like this. And but she said, "Come on," and we did, and it was really fun. It was all G.I. Joe all the time at that place.
Yeah.
But we've been here this morning in Cincy at the Comic Expo, and then you guys called, and I'm just all a Twitter.
Yeah.
So with a small T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine that being a part of G.I. Joe would have the staying power that it's had? Because it's like you said, it's been 35 years, and people are still requesting you on their show to come and do Flint's voice. Even now, you know?
Yeah.
Did you think that it would be like this?
There's a phenomenon that I experienced, and it was the only thing that allowed me to understand the emotional connection.
Yeah.
It's usually men in their 40s and 50s who watched the show as kids.
Yeah.
And today, literally 35 years later, they're saying things from a very deep emotional place. "I want to thank you, and it really meant so much to me, and it means a lot." And I did not understand until I went to Hotel del Coronado in Southern California, rented the audio tour, put my little headphones on, and heard the voice of cartoons in my youth. Rocket J. Squirrel cartoon, and on and on and on, and started crying when I heard this guy's voice. He was an old character actor and Warner Brothers contract player, and I thought, why am I crying, and why does this mean so much to me? I was 8, 9 years old, and these are the voices that amused me and that took away my pain as a 9-year-old.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think same with on-camera actors. They enter your consciousness at a sort of different level,
Right.
but the voice is even a little more mysterious.
Right.
And so I'm just really touched by other people's experiences. And to answer your question, I had no idea this would last like this at all. Part of it is the quality of the cartoon work. That was a collaboration between Sunbow, Hasbro,
Right.
and the Japanese anime producers, who were brought in because American TV animation did not have the chops in 1983 to do zooming, tilting, and panning, believe it or not.
Interesting.
Disney had it in film,
Yeah.
but TV animation did not have it. And the Japanese did. And so what resulted in the Transformers and G.I. Joe Real American Hero cartoons was this visual phenomenon on TV that had never been seen.
Right, the first of its kind.
And the scripts were written by episodic TV writers instead of just cartoon writers.
Yeah.
And the sessions, the voiceover sessions took 4.5 hours as opposed to an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
And some actors would complain, "Wally," the director, "Wally, can we leave? These are supposed to be an hour and a half." He says, "The union says I got you for 8 hours, so shut up and talk." And these sessions took literally 3 times as long as the Hanna-Barbera voiceover sessions because they wanted real acting. Get out of your character and just talk like a human being. Because the Joe team was a bunch of human beings, men and women who had a job to do, by gum, and they did it. So that resulted in unusual looking television. Yeah. And I must say, those of us who are on the show, we're not terribly untalented ourselves.
Not at all. I think this comes from a really real place, too, because let me tell you, my dad was a huge G.I. Joe fan.
Hardcore.
And then he gave me all the G.I. Joe toys. And then when I said, "Hey, we're talking to one of the G.I. Joe actors," he just stopped. He's like, "Really?"
Hi, Dad.
"Hello, Dad." And
What's his name?
It's William. It's Billy.
That's what they called me. Bill, it's Billy, or Billy, it's Bill. Whatever, who you want to be. You want to be Bill or Billy?
Yeah, he's Billy.
Yo,
so,
Joe.
So, hello, Dad. It's a G.I. Joe.
Glowing is half the battle.
That's 100% right.
That voice gives me chills because I remember, because I watched some of the cartoons growing up too. I was really young, but knowing is half the battle. It's just chills.
Well, you know, it was interesting where that came from. I had a guy come up to me at G.I. Joe Con in Indianapolis, 42-year-old guy, and who shook my hand, and he said, very sincerely, I want to thank you for teaching me morality and ethics. Yeah. And I looked behind me to see if Billy Graham was back there, and he was talking to him, and I said, what do you mean? Yeah. And he said, I was 9 years old when I watched G.I. Joe. My parents were getting divorced. My life was a little lost, and you had these PSAs on where you sort of taught, life lessons and so on. And I remembered back, and I'd seen, spoofs of these things where they would dub 8-year-olds' voices going, and no, glowing is half the battle, and go Joe, and silly stuff. Yeah. But I started looking up on YouTube the old PSAs, and remembered back to the day, which was the second season in like 1984. Where some producer from Hasbro came into the room. We're all standing there at our music stands, and in the middle of a break, we're recording a voiceover session for G.I. Joe. And he goes, here, read these. And I go, well, what are they? And he goes, you're not going to get paid any extra, just read them. Well, what are they? Yeah. They're public service announcements because parent groups have gotten all upset and threatened a boycott of Hasbro toys, especially G.I. Joe and Transformers, if you guys don't read these. Oh, wow. And they were kind of, Disney-esque, little morality narratives about families in peril or kids in trouble with each other or, kids committing acts that they shouldn't commit. And Flint drives up in most of them and says, hey, Billy, talking to your dad now.
Hello, Dad.
You really shouldn't throw rocks at your sister's playhouse because sonic booms could result. Now you know, and knowing's half the battle. And these were big, I think they ran in every show. Yeah. And they ran separately from the shows as kind of promos for the shows. And I had no idea sort of the effectiveness of these things on a small child's mind.
Yeah. It's so iconic because I cannot hear, and now you know, without finishing it. Yeah. And knowing's half the battle, I always say it. And it's just... Yeah, it's ingrained in our culture now, I think, because of you guys. So thanks for that.
Well, I mean, there's huge long history with G.I. Joe, who was originally, I believe, an editorial cartoon character in World War II, and then the comic book was made in the late 40s, 50s, and it was a character named Joe, G.I. Joe. And G.I. Joe was really the generic name for the grunt, for the soldier who fought in the trenches, and he fought the Japanese and the Koreans in the comic books, and then came the G.I. Joe doll, and then came the Vietnam War, and then came the fall in popularity of G.I. Joe toys, right around the end of Mr. Nixon's term and the winding down of the Vietnam War. People were tired of it. And then came George Lucas and Star Wars, and action figures shrunk down from 11 inches to 3.5 inches. Lucas's billions, and Hasbro going, we're envious of all that. Right. And I just heard a story today of one of the animators was asked, well, how big should these toys be? And he held up his fist, said they should be this big, hand size, meaning about 3.5 to 4 inches max, with little Phillips screws holding the arms together and a little rubber band holding the rest of it together. And thus came the Joe team, cloned from Joe, the guy, G.I. Joe. And Hasbro thus entered one of the most profitable periods of its history, making Transformers and G.I. Joe action figures. And instead of one G.I. Joe toy, you could buy 90 near the end of the series.
And I did.
Yeah.
I had.
He actually brought several.
Yeah, I have a whole box of G.I. Joe toys at their house.
He does. They are everywhere.
With vehicles and G.I. Joe toys.
Right.
I had all G.I. Joes that came out in the 90s, plus my dad's old toys, and then I also had Power Rangers and Transformers, and I would have little crossover battles. And now Hasbro owns all of them, so it might happen for real. So,
it might.
Yeah.
Is it true? I mean, I've asked a number of guys. So, what do you trade these? No, I just keep them. Yeah, and I said, so like when you want to buy a gigantic oligarch's mansion outside Minsk, maybe he'll say, maybe I'll sell them. So there's got to be not only the deep emotional connection, absolutely, but I'm guessing that behind all that lurks a profit motive. May kick in about age 65, you know.
All right, fine, I'll let it go.
Yeah, I mean, I had a guy come up to me at JoeCon with a duffel bag, which he unzipped. You know, there's a line of people behind him, and I think the handler, was off having lunch or something. I went, okay, well, why not put this guy's kids through college? Just signed a bunch of them, and it was we were prepaid, so we weren't like charging. Here's my autograph. Give me $25. Which because I don't do a lot of these. This is the only second con I've ever done. Right. We did a couple of Joe panels in Long Beach Comic Con for free. I mean, we just did them. It was like a reunion, and I still work. I do voiceovers, and I witnessed a couple of folks who had done G.I. Joe at the Long Beach Comic Con signing, and then somebody behind him, a hand would reach out. Whose hand is that? And it sort of was like, wait a minute, isn't this just about chatting and talking and so on? Yeah. And I mean, we get paid. They pay our way, and my new Bentley's outside, and the oligarch's cabin outside Minsk is mine for a month. That's my payment. Yeah.
That's good stuff. Yeah. Now, G.I. Joe came out in a time when there was already a war going on. Do you feel like the importance of G.I. Joe came from a lot of the importance and the want of a show like G.I. Joe came from the kids whose parents were at war and away from them?
That's a really interesting question. And in the beginning, when the Joe team was created, after the comic book, after the G.I. Joe action figure, that was, the Barbie of male figures, same size, same dimensions. Well, not exactly the same.
A little different.
The Hasbro, which was headquartered in Providence, Rhode Island, went to the National Guard, the local National Guard, and said, is there any way we could gain access to the weaponry that you guys use on maneuvers every month? And they said, well, this is, there's security involved here, and we're part of the federal government, we're one of the armed forces, But, and then the PR guy got back to Hasbro and said, what can you do for us? So there was a quid pro quo between Hasbro and the National Guard, which said essentially, yes, Hasbro, you can examine our modern weaponry, which we don't let civilians look at and play with, if you, meaning you, the writers, and Hasbro, will give us some PR. And, the military has always been in need of PR. It's always been very difficult in times of recruitment. Right. And so to answer your question, I think that the comic book was in reaction to the end of World War II. It was in reaction to the Korean War. Yeah. The Korean War was difficult for Americans. People were drafted, and they were dying in 0-degree weather, and fighting a war that people didn't understand, much like the Vietnam War. And I think, I know that I get emails from a lot of vets, a lot of guys who went through Desert Storm in the early 90s, and chased Saddam Hussein back across the Kuwaiti-Iraqi border. And younger men and women today who are in the armed forces, who seen the G.I. Joe episodes and seen that there is, some people could call it corny, but there is this kind of, it's the Joe team versus world terrorism. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's the narrative theme. Right. And so, somebody who's in the armed forces going, what am I doing here? And suddenly sees this cartoon, goes, yeah, well, that's what I'm doing. I sort of like this. And I mean, we're getting into territory that where psychologists might say, "Who is this idiot? Is it Bill or Billy who was talking?" It was your dad who was just talking. Travis.
Hi, Dad.
But so there's a lot of nuance in there. Why do people love a particular cartoon and its narrative? Yeah. One guy came up to me at G.I. Joe Con and said, "Are you aware that you're responsible?" You put his finger in my chest, and he said it in a nice way. For 50% of us becoming first responders and military. And I went, gulp. But he went on to explain it, in a very positive way. He said, I was in the Army, and most of my buddies, and we watched the show, and it was partly because of the show that we joined the military. Right. And
well, you guys were heroes on there.
So, right, yeah. And nobody died in G.I. Joe, the Real American Hero. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, these are really interesting questions, and I'm not sure there are probably a lot of answers and a lot of nuance. But the end result is here at Cincinnati Comic Expo, everybody who has come up to us, me and Lady J, are just sweethearts. A lot of them are vets, with their wives and kids, and their kids watch the show, and it just the end result of it all is new friendships and great conversations and a lot of heart to heart. Yeah,
because to me, I feel like it's almost like when kids were watching it, it's kind of like they got to see a little window into what their parents were doing at war. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't just like superheroes blowing up spaceships. It was like real heroes that were accessible.
Right. It's like, this is what my cousin who went to war was doing.
It's hard to say what, if you could really press the Hasbro executives and the writers of the show, the head writers, and say to them, all right, what was really on your mind in 1982, other than profits, other than cloning Joe the figure into 90 Joe members of the Joe team for profits? Right. What else was on your mind? What were you really trying to say in this show? And I don't have an answer for that. Yeah. Was it genuine morality and ethical lessons, or not? I'm not sure. And but it's you guys are asking such difficult questions.
We don't mean to. We're just excited.
Do you have any snacks?
Probably somewhere. In my purse, actually.
Yeah.
My big furry bag.
Granola bars.
My giant furry bag. Do you want one? We've got snackies.
Chocolate granola bars in there.
Hold on, I'm going to change to the next one. All right. So, kind of talking about children in media. You wrote a book about this.
Yes.
Can you tell me about it?
I was hired by the Timpanogos Storytelling Conference that's run in Provo, Utah at Brigham Young. And it's an annual event for teachers and historians and storytellers, where they hire storytellers and we go and tell stories and teach workshops in storytelling. Yeah. And I was I was taking a friend's workshop and sitting next to a woman who I thought was probably a grad student, turned out to be a 40-year-old mother of 9. Ooh. And at the end of the workshop, she said, "So have you ever thought of writing a book about your volunteering in schools? I do a thing called Media Awareness for Children." Right. And I said, "No. Why do you ask?" She said, "Because my husband and I just started a publishing company." I went, "Oh, I never thought of writing a book." I'd gotten some short stories published and some personal essays in little obscure literary magazines and stuff. Yeah. And so I wrote a chapter and I wrote an intro and sent it to them, and they said, "Let's do it," and sent me a contract. And I went, gulp. How do you do this? Because I'd written nothing longer than 1,500 words in my life, including in college, even though 4,500 words was required. And so I, began talking with friends, and I interviewed kids and asked them questions like, how did your parents try to filter your media experience? Did they control your TV habits? Did they control your online viewing habits? Yeah. And I interviewed their parents, and I talked to my friends who are voiceover artists, and I did a chapter on Barbie, and I interviewed the original Barbie, and sort of the creation of Barbie, and then G.I. Joe. Yeah. And a lot of the history that we're talking about, G.I. Joe was one of and Transformers, really together, was one of the biggest merchandising coups in the history of television and toys. Yeah. That's really what it was. And it resulted in cool media. It resulted in a great show. But I was confronted once at ABC TV where I do on-air promos. Yeah. And the guy said, wait a minute, he was a younger guy, and he's handing me my script, today on daytime television on ABC. Chills. He said, wait a minute, are you the guy who tells his kids they can't watch TV? And I said, well, we watch Pee Wee Herman, and I watch stuff with him, and, we have DVDs, and we watch movies and stuff. He goes, wait a minute. You don't let your kids watch TV, but we pay you to tell people to watch TV. What's up with that? And I thought, oops, I've got to come up with something intelligent sounding. And then it hit me. I said, I have two jobs. One is I'm a union laborer doing stuff that they ask me to do and they pay me. Mm-hmm. And my other job is as a parent. Right. And I could see that my daughters, with free reign at age 3 over the VCR machine, they knew how to operate it faster than I did. Yeah. And they were spending hours. And then my wife told me the story of her father pulling tubes, old vacuum tubes, out of the back of their RCA black and white monitor when my wife was 7 and her sister was 12, because both of them were messing up in school. Yeah. And he never got the TV repair guy out there. Gee, honey, TV just didn't fix itself. So we actually had a switch installed, electric switch, single light switch, in our basement. Only I knew where it was. That would turn off every outlet in the family room where the VCR, the TV monitor, where everything was plugged in. Yeah. And sometimes, mysteriously, every night at about 7 o'clock on weeknights, it would just stop working. Daddy, the VCR doesn't work. This is kind of a way of dealing with it. I could have just said, no, dear, you're not watching television because I know that morally and ethically it's wrong to have you do anything but praise your parents and do your homework now. Right. But instead, I took the easy way out and did this.
I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah.
That still exists. Yeah. You just changed the Wi-Fi password now.
That's 100% right.
But I really got a lot of mileage out of it. I ended up talking to psychologists, mm-hmm. and there are people who there's a psychologist who teaches at MIT named Sherry Fink, who was on 2 covers of Wired magazine saying the internet is the greatest thing for children in education since the printing press. And then about 3 years later, after studies were done, including at MIT, of entering students, 17 and 18-year-old students, arguably the cream of the crop. If you can get into MIT, you're fairly bright. Right. And they can bet on you as maybe making a contribution to the world as an MIT grad, mm-hmm. that they were failing the same courses that no one failed, the same survey courses that no one failed in their freshman year for the last 25 years. Interesting. And the professors were getting their TAs to wander through classrooms to see what they were doing on their phones and on their laptops, or taking notes. They weren't taking notes. They were on Instagram, Facebook, updating their CVs, on and on and on. So then they made it possible for professors to say, well, okay, no electronics in the classroom. Right. The professors who did, suddenly there was discussion in the class. Mm-hmm. Suddenly the kids' grades were going up, the performance on the same tests that kids had performed higher on in an earlier generation. And yet parents were calling, I just spent $3,000 for all the add-ons on that beautiful IBM computer. How dare you? And then it became department-wide, first in physics, then And so they're just discussing now in higher education what to do about students in electronics. Of course, your dorm room, do whatever you want. But in class, if it's a discussion class, and of course it's not in the interest of the makers of hardware or software to discuss this. Steve Jobs, as he was dying, was interviewed by the New York Times by a guy who wanted to do a profile of just Jobs. Mm-hmm. And he said, gee, Mr. Jobs, you've got 3 kids. It must be so cool for them to grow up in this house with all this wild electronics.
Yeah.
And he said, it's all banned from the house. This is an analog house. What do you mean? And he said, this stuff is addictive. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't let my kids. This is Steve Jobs. The guy, the journalist changed the whole thrust of the story and got to CEOs and CFOs of Silicon Valley corporations and asked the same questions. And they said the same thing. All of them said the same thing, whether they were manufacturing hardware or software. No, we don't let our kids use this stuff. Are you kidding? It'd wreck their minds. Not necessarily because of the content, but because of the amount of time
spent on it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I find the same thing with myself.
Right.
I'm writing another book, and I suddenly, months will go by, and there's my manuscript is still dated, June 1st, 2018. Yeah. And I go, gee, why is that? That's because I sit there Googling and YouTubing.
Yes.
So it's the same.
Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
And like whenever you go to the computer, it becomes the habit. Even if you're going to sit down to write something, it's a habit to you. It just pops in your head. I should probably look on YouTube right now because I'm pretty sure that's important to what I'm about to do.
This cat video?
And then you watch cat videos all day.
So I wrote the book, Parenting for the Digital Age, The Truth About Media's Effect on Children, What to Do It by Familius Books. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, at a bookstore near you. I wrote it for parents who, many parents, rich or poor, it does not matter, because I've been in private schools where tuition is like $22,000 a year for their 8th grader. They have this exact same confusion as a working class parent who works 2 jobs. What do I do when my kid is online all the time, my kid's gaming all the time?
Right.
I've suggested kerosene. C5 plastic explosive. No, so that's why I wrote that book. And this is a very long-winded answer to your question. And it took me on just an incredible journey. I worked for a lot of TV stations doing promos. And I called them all up and said, I wrote this book. And they said, oh, you want us to put you on our morning show so you can tell people their kids shouldn't watch television? But a few of them bought it, and so I did a tour. I went to Texas, and I went to Connecticut, and I had a great time with my clients, and they put me on their morning show. And we had conversations like this about what does a parent do when their kid is just lost in the digital world? Yeah. Do you prevent it? Do you think it's the Satan's work? No. Just give them a schedule like you get at work.
Limit it.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
So that's the biggest tip. Just limit that, man. Limit that internet.
The more you know. Knowing's half the battle.
Knowledge is power, guys. Limit the internet because it's bad for you. It is. So, speaking of media, and promos and such, you are on like every single promo.
Yeah, we were looking you up because we were just like, oh, he's on G.I. Joe. That's awesome. He was.
And I was like, Mass Effect, yes.
And then we heard your voice doing all these commercials, and we were like, that guy.
The Cartoon Network. But unfortunately, I'm the go-to guy for when they want a 50s announcer.
Yeah.
And I was only 12, but I made fun of all the announcers. Yeah. Today brought to you by Chevrolet. That's what I get hired to do. So television is now folding back on itself, right?
It's true.
The 80s, that's a long time ago. How about the 50s? Yes, that's right. I did a thing for... Yeah. I did a thing for Kimmel the other night. Yeah. They had a State Department PSA where they were using like hipster language. Mm-hmm. The State Department is really awesome sauce. And they hired me, and I did the revision of the script. It was going to be on Kimmel that night. Yeah. And then I get an email at the last minute when I'm bragging to my wife. They decided that they wanted a younger voice. So
lame!
Why? The producer. Because I thought it would have sounded great with me on it.
Would have.
But I actually listened to it. I actually went on YouTube and went Kimmel State Department. Yeah. And it was a producer's voice, the State Department, blah, 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 blah. Because it was too much of a joke. Oh. It was too much of a, this is a fake commercial for the State Department. Okay. So I still do promo, but I do promo, and I think it's 1959.
So have you ever done those movie promos, the In a World, those type of things?
I had a manager once who set for promo, for promo and trailer, who sent an email out to his clients list. and he said, "Stop making fun of its inner world. Don't do any more of those."
Do one right now.
He says, "What are you talking? In a world where tiny little green men come out of a ship, and you feel like an idiot." By Parenting for the Digital Age, the truth about media's effect on children. And this was originally the great Don LaFontaine. Don LaFontaine, who did every promo and every trailer for years.
Yeah.
Actually, the truth is, it was the great Hal Douglas. Hal Douglas, Google that.
Okay.
And listen to him. He did every trailer and every promo with this kind of whimsical sort of read like this. When Don LaFontaine's read was alive, was just a lot tougher. And Don LaFontaine, you can hear him on stuff. He's been dead for 10 years. And you could still hear him. It's still out there. And Don created the phrase "in a world." He originally was an editor. He was edited for Paramount and Kaleidoscope and wrote the trailers and promos.
Yeah.
And when he was in his 40s, somebody said, "But your voice is on the scratch track. You sound great. We should use you." No, man, I don't do this stuff. I just write. I make my money writing and editing. And they begged him, no, please do it. We'll pay you.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, an agent named Steve Tischerman lured him. Took him 2 years to get Don LaFontaine to agree to do "In a World" at the microphone.
So do you do it now?
So I and 50 other guys and women still do Don LaFontaine. Every time we talk like this, why are you talking like this? Because this guy's read was so incredible.
Right.
But I'm like a cheap imitation of Don LaFontaine. So oddly enough, for promo and for narration, I mean, I do air disasters. 420 people died on June 17th. That's me. This is a sad, tragic, fascinating, bizarre show.
Yeah.
And I almost got away with it. Sally Barson was on the road for 12 years on the lam. And these are tragic stories. That's promo and narration.
Right.
But for film, for some reason, I end up doing comedy. He was a funny guy, and she was an idiot. And he became an idiot, and she became a funny guy from Pixar. Why? I don't know. We all kind of get
You
pigeonholed.
gravitate towards what you're like.
Ferdinand, that kind of stuff. So I mean, that's these days. That's what I do for a living. They can't see me. They can't see the graying temples.
But they can hear the amazing voice.
Yeah.
Like, in this room, you are booming.
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
That's why I chose this room. Yeah.
you're
Gotta
like,
get
I
that
know where my
acoustic.
voice sounds good.
You gotta sell my voice.
One gig recently.
Yeah.
Where the agent called me and said, this is a corporation, they're doing a year-end thing just for the employees and stockholders, and they want the voice of God, but they don't want to be on the line. You'll just do it by yourself.
Yeah.
I said, they want the voice of God, which is a phrase meaning, a deep stentorian voice, yeah. But they don't want to hear it?
Yeah.
And I thought, how can I be the voice of God alone when no one's hearing me?
Right.
So it was the Boombard Company, or whatever they're called. The year end was successful. You should have seen the rear end. No. The beginning of the year. And
That was spiritual.
I had to literally do the voice of God alone. No one cared. The check didn't bounce. That's what counts.
what counts,
Yeah. So no, I mean, I've been wanting to do voices since I was 12 years. No, since I was 5.
Yeah.
I lived in Des Moines, Iowa, and my dad bought us a brand new TV set, turned it on. This is off. Enjoy. Left the room, and I believe one of the first things I heard was, "This commercial message will be 60 seconds long,"
Yeah.
which, needless to say, they don't do today.
Right.
And then came, like, Oldsmobile for 1952, blah, 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 blah. And I watched this, and I held my breath. 60 seconds. Aha, that's a minute. And I ran into the kitchen. "Mom, I know what a minute is. 60 seconds. Oh, that's great, honey.
You did it.
You learned that? Yeah, you did it. Thank God he's not as stupid as we thought." And she said, did you learn that in kindergarten? I said, "No, the man on TV said it." "Oh, what did he look like?" "He was invisible, Mother. He was invisible." So from the beginning.
Tyler just starts talking like that.
Yeah. I when I was 6 years old. "Hello, teacher. My name is Bill." Or Billy, depending on what name your father's going to use, Travis.
Billy.
So no, I've been absolutely, and still when I was growing up, I mean, it was radio was mainly top 40 rock and roll AM radio, but there was still radio drama on. Into the 60s, there was radio drama.
Right.
And so I could hear these announcements brought to you by Camel Cigarettes, you know. Do you have one on you, by the way?
No.
Okay.
I don't smoke.
I don't either.
It's bad for you.
I should. I'd sound better, you know.
No,
that's right.
great voice.
There's a wonderful guy at CBS, a promo announcer, who was the voice of CBS promos and every Disney film in the world for years. And he was a smoker, and then he quit. And there were some guys there who wanted to sort of mess with him. And he goes, I quit 2 weeks ago, and I think I sound better. And one of the mixers said, "You know what, man? You sound like a girl." They were kidding. He started smoking again.
No.
Yeah. I think he's quit. Either that or he's dead.
That's what I was wondering. I was like, he got throat cancer, now he's gone. Terrible. So, you have been in the voice acting business since the 80s.
Yes.
How has it changed, like with technology?
Technology has allowed tens of thousands of people to audition. You can go on voices.com, Voice123, and they have thousands of people in their roster. They still need, professional, well-trained voices and so on, and people, members of the Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA, and so on like that. But these days, it gives people access, much greater access. All you have to do is, if you live in Louisville, Google voiceover training Louisville, or voiceover actors Louisville, or whatever. And you listen to people's demos. You can go on voiceoverresourceguide.com or atlastalent.com and listen to voiceover demos and go in your basement and make one and submit it. acx.com, owned by Amazon, whose mission is to record every book that has ever been published in the English language. They don't hire celebrities. They don't hire authors because they're all dead. They hire people in their basements who are good readers, who have a decent microphone and a room that doesn't echo like this one. And so people school teachers, librarians, everybody, people who do podcasts, are doing voices on tape. acx.com. You can set up your own web page, put your demos up there, and prospect around. So the internet has made a huge difference. I'm very glad I started out when I did. My daughter's into voiceovers, and it's harder for her generation. She's 31, because there are just a lot more people competing, and the ad agencies and the production houses want cheap.
Right.
They want quality, but they want cheap. So they will audition 50 people in Tallahassee who are not in the union, they'll say, well, this will pay you $50, and either they work out or they don't. If they don't work out, then they'll go to Hollywood, New York, Chicago, whatever. But there's tremendous access for actors, for people who just want to do it or love to do crazy voices. And 85% of the game voices are recorded outside Chicago, New York, LA. They're recorded in wherever there is a video, computer game production company. El Paso, Tampa, wherever. And they all hire voices.
So you're on I'm just going to tell you this, you're on one of my favorite video games, King's Quest.
King's Quest, which used to be discs that you would put in your computer. Yes.
It was so hard to save your game because the little guy kept dying, and I'm like, oh.
Didn't they ever come out with a disc DVD version?
Yes, they have a DVD CD-ROM kind of version, but the which one is it? I think it's King's Quest 7. It doesn't work.
Oh.
It doesn't work, and I'm like, how am I supposed to enjoy my games?
It's weird. The production company probably just didn't invest in getting it right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. They actually.
I remember recording that. If you want to turn the rock over, you'll see a rose. Don't jump over that wall.
I'm just geeking
because
out.
On the other side is a lake of cowpucky.
Oh my gosh.
They're really
do you
happy
remember
right now.
everything?
No.
Like
I do remember that because I didn't get it.
Right.
I didn't get what a game like that was. I didn't get that there were choices that the user made. And wait a minute, why are you saying don't turn the rock over, there's a rose? Because he has a choice, you know. And if she jumps over the wall, there's Cowpucky, she can choose not to jump over the wall. Oh, really? I still didn't get it. I don't get it today. And I don't get why Udell, what's his name? Udina. What's his first name?
Oh,
this is
Flint.
embarrassing. Odell. Udell.
Do you know Mitch?
Udina. Odell, Undel, Manel, Udina. In Mass Effect 3, I said, well, I'm waiting for the gig for Mass Effect 4. And somebody on the floor said, no. Udina's dead.
Yeah.
I went, oh, shoot.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's like 600 years in the future.
Yeah.
It'd be weird if you was
People
still
can.
alive.
Maybe you could be like a biotic version.
Yes.
Like you could come back as a robot and be like, I am Udina.
Donnell, Udina. Yes, right.
I just spit everywhere. I'm so sorry.
Spit on me. I played Flint's father in Transformers episode, the ghost of Flint's father advising his granddaughter, who is a special ops female, soldier,
Yeah.
in how to live life.
That's what you gotta do. You need to get in touch with these Mass Effect people and be like,
Have it be a robot, have me be a ghost, have me come on back in there.
And then have a comeback.
exactly.
I mean, Shepard was dead. They brought Shepard back. They could bring you back.
I
I'm
don't know. I
just
think
saying.
the last game kind of killed us.
Oh, yeah.
Timothy Leary's dead. He had his head cut off after his death,
Yeah.
and it's on ice in one of these cryonic companies, and so
With Walt Disney's head.
with the hope, yes, exactly. This is true. With the hope that one day they can bring him back.
Have you seen it?
But no, I haven't
He's
seen
like, he
it.
knows where it's hidden.
I was like, we should go.
Yeah.
We should go right now.
If cryonic ink is on the rocks, we could probably get in and see
Get a
it
story here.
for a fee.
Breaking news. Walt Disney's head, Tom O'Leary's head. Let's go get him. That would be amazing. I would do it. I'm not kidding. But again, like we're talking about video games right now. You have been in a lot of video games, and I know that you're not necessarily for like television and all that, but have you actually gotten to play some of the video games that you've been on?
The closest I've gotten is one of the producers will send me a link to a promo online, which is not playing the game.
Right.
So the answer is no. I've never ever played the game.
Fascinating.
Show me. I've never played the game because you can play it, on a small like a
Right.
PlayStation, right? Yeah. No.
You should do like a Twitch live stream. You should do like a Twitch live stream and play your games and like do your lines and like freak people out.
That's a great idea. Let's do
People
it.
would be like, this is so.
This is
We'll Skype
crazy
it.
amazing.
Yeah, good.
Ah, people would cry.
And it's not because I've refused to. I would do it in a second. If somebody said, hey, I've got Mass Effect 1 or Grand Theft Auto 5 or whatever, I would play it in a second just to see it. I've done, VR. I've seen, I've gone into art galleries and put, the thing on my head and watched the VR. But never a computer game. Silly me. I'm a virgin.
You just don't have them. We need to send it to you.
My daughters were not, the computer games was not their thing for some reason. It wasn't like, ew, Dad, ew. Nobody ever, no auntie ever gave them one for Christmas.
I had older sisters. So all of my older sisters were big old giant dorks, and it passed on down to me. I actually think it started with my dad because my dad was hardcore. He was like, look
such a
at
nerd.
all these video games. He plays Pokemon Go on his phone.
He really does. He's into it more than
He's
any young
hardcore.
person.
Look at this. I'm going to do it. He's hardcore into it. And, like, he has 2 phones now. So that he
Double
can play
fisting
it.
Pokemon Go.
He can play it on both phones. I know. My dad's fascinating. I love him.
Steve, you're
The New York
fascinating.
Times has this sort of fake VR thing where you can hold your phone up and pretend you're in the Iraq War, But I'm a civilian and I live in Hollywood, so.
Sounds dangerous.
Close as I've gotten.
I don't think I would want to play that game.
I know. I'd be like,
Actually, there's a new VR company that's doing pop-ups in malls around the country.
What?
Sort of road testing their VR stuff, and Spielberg and others have invested, Universal, in what will ultimately be next door to the Gap,
Yeah.
the blah 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 VR, And a friend who's in media got me a ticket, so we went on a Saturday morning.
Aw.
I mean, we kind of already had that in like the 80s and 90s with the little flight simulator
We
things in
did.
the malls.
You can just go to Disney and go on their flight game.
Fly California.
That thing is so good.
Yeah.
I love that thing. I wish every time that I've tried to go, it's broken down.
Really?
I've never gotten to go
Aaron's
on it.
coming. Unplug it.
Oh, she's here. Pull it.
Profits are down. Screw Air California.
I know, it hurts my feelings.
It's great. That's fun. But the Harry Potter, I just did Harry Potter at Universal with my niece and her kids, and that was violent. I almost lost my
Oh,
lunch.
really?
Yeah.
Oh wait, which one? No, which ride? Because the one where you're in Hogwarts isn't that bad. The one where you're in the bank.
I think this is Hogwarts.
The Hogwarts one?
Yeah, because they're jerking you around and you're spinning and spinning, and I had to close my eyes. It wasn't like it was a dumb ride.
Right.
It was like too much
Movement.
vertigo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom gets really bad vertigo. Like she actually did okay on that ride. I can't remember the teacups. She can't do them. She is like she's puke city on the teacups.
Yeah.
No jokes.
Which is not great for the tourists below. No.
Not even a little bit. So, I wanted to ask you about something else. Hold on, let me go to it. So, I was doing a lot of research on you, and what is the Moth Story Slams in LA?
Moth.
You've won it 9 times? I want to understand this because it sounds fascinating.
The Moth is a national organization, themoth.org.
Uh-huh.
It started out in New York City as a storytelling show. A writer named George Dawes Green, who was kind of a middle-aged thriller writer, had a party, and he said, I'm sick of these bookie parties where agents come and authors come and everybody poses. And so he sent out He sent out an invitation saying, I want you to bring a 5-minute story and tell it. No readings, no cards, no notes. On a theme. I don't know what it was. Family, cars, breakups, whatever. And if you absolutely don't want to do it, you don't have to, but I really urge you. So most of the people who came, at a certain point after the drinks and snacks, he said, okay, everybody sit down. We're going to tell stories. And who's first? And they did, and people were transformed. They'd never been at a party where people were really allowed to focus on somebody else's story, and then the next person told, and the next person told, and the next person told.
Yeah.
And everybody said, this is the greatest thing we've ever done. This is the most fun we've ever had. So he said, well, I'm not doing it in my apartment again. You guys are pigs. And so they moved it to like the New York Poets Cafe or some bookstore or something. And now that show, the live storytelling show, is a contest.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like Def Jam Poetry Slam was on HBO. Same kind of rules, but instead of tonight, it's stories on a theme.
Yeah.
5 minutes. And it can be funny, can be tragic, can be weird, purportedly true. They want true stories.
Yeah.
They are in about 30 cities.
Yeah.
And they have the Moth main stage, which is a touring show. And they have the Moth Storytelling Hour on about 120 radio stations around the country. Mainly the bottom of the FM dial, NPR stations. And so you go in, you put your name in a hat, and you've sort of worked out a story on the theme that you've read on the website the month before, and they either call you or they don't, depending if your name is pulled out of the hat, and you get up and you go, so anyway, so once upon a time, and they have judges.
Yeah.
It's, like the Olympics, like a poetry slam, like Def Jam Poetry Slam. And the spoken word scene is a big time thing. The sort of the R&B and rap and spoken word are kind of similar arenas.
Right.
Except spoken word and rap, they have contests and rules,
Right.
competitions, and this is the same kind of deal, only slower and quieter. And I won 9 of them. When you win one in your city, you go on to the Grand Slam, which is held every 6 months in that city.
Yeah.
And I participated in 9 Grand Slams. And
Have you won the Grand Slam?
never. I almost did, but then this young dude got on and told a great story about being arrested for robbing a bank that he didn't rob, and so on. So he won. He deserved to win. But
Yeah.
the storytelling scene is really fun. Look up themoth.org or just Google storytelling your city, live storytelling your city. And it's not a bunch of retired librarians.
Yeah.
It's people in their 20s, 30s, 40s who are going to a bar or a nightclub once a month and paying $7. They don't do a 2-drink minimum, and putting their name in a hat and telling really embarrassing, crazy stories.
Do one right now.
Oh, when I was a child.
You don't really have to. I'm just messing with you.
She just likes to put people on the spot. That sounds fascinating,
It
though.
does. It sounds really neat.
Dolores, when I was 5.
Do it.
She was 7.5, but
Do you want to?
she was an
Sounds-
older woman. No, this
sounds-
could go on and on and on. It's probably illegal. We're probably breaking not only FCC rules, every rule that Howard Stern has broken and more. Because Dolores was hot stuff.
Ooh la la.
I was 5.5, but I remember every moment.
Of that 7.5-year-old.
You can't even
Early
help it.
awakening.
Now, you've even done personal essays? And you've won awards for those too, or?
These Moth stories.
Okay.
You end up with 750 words, 5 minutes, 3 type pages, 2.5 type pages. Well, what do I do with it? And then somebody said, well, don't you publish these things? What do you mean, self-publish? No, send them into literary magazines. Oh, there's one called Creative Nonfiction. There's one called Narrative Magazine.
Yeah.
It used to be 10 years ago, personal essays weren't that popular, true stories. Everything from the woman who has triplets, on the freeway, to the guy who gets busted for drugs in church. Crazy stuff. And so I started sending my stuff out, and I'd get these tiny little. The Paris Review sent me a piece of paper that was about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
They probably had an intern cutting up pieces of paper to save money,
Right.
save a tree, that said, "Thank you for your submission, but your work is not quite right for us at this time." So I'd get 100 of those, and then I'd get one, "Congratulations, you've been published in." And it's fun. I had a writing teacher who said, "When you get published, do you put like the cover of the magazine or the literary magazine up on your wall?" And I went, "No, why?" "Come here!" And he grabbed my arm, took me into the hall of his house,
Yeah.
and said, "Every one of those frames, see that? Those are the magazines I've been published in. I'm a real writer, not like you, Billy."
Rude.
No. What he meant was, if you get a gig, you got a gig.
Right.
Be
Be proud of it.
Yeah, like a dancer who gets paid for the first time, or an announcer gets paid for the first time, or an athlete who gets paid for the first time, whatever. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Take selfies.
Totally.
Yeah.
Did you study under anyone to
Yes.
learn how to do voice acting? So what did you do exactly?
I did radio and stuff without having studied him. But when I came to Hollywood, I got the great advice of somebody at a radio station. He said, "You should take voiceovers." I said, "What are voiceovers?" Literally. And he said, "You just did 60 tags available in San Fernando, available in San Fernando, available in San Fernando."
That's what you're doing,
CBS
dude.
stores.
Right.
And the guy who recorded the commercial that was 56 seconds long got paid $300 for a half hour's work. And I went, "That's voiceovers?" I said, "Yeah." And so he gave me a name of a guy, his friend, who taught workshops in L.A. And all you got to do is Google voiceover workshops. And I was in workshops for as long as it takes an undergraduate to go through medical school.
Yeah.
I did 6 years of study every single week, probably 45 weeks of the year. I was in some crazy workshop studying cartoon voices or whatever. And finally my agent said, Stop, why are you doing this? And I said, well, because it's a great workout.
Yeah.
No, but you're working. Your bosses are your teachers now. Oh, okay. And but these days, I actually study with a voice coach for vocal stuff,
Yeah.
so that I don't sound like this all the time.
Yeah.
And that's sort of almost, old-fashioned. Anybody who's ever taken a singing class or an acting class, where you do go 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 go,
Yeah.
And so I still to this day.
My favorite one is.
Yeah, there you go.
That's my favorite.
Naoma, ladies and gentlemen, that was Naoma.
Yeah, our choir teacher always had us do the police sirens. You remember that?
Yeah, that was good.
It's loud.
It was very loud, but it was very effective.
It was.
So now you actually teach voice acting, don't you?
The only place I teach, I don't do it commercially because I still do voiceovers, and 10 years from now it'll be Naoma, this is Bill, For only $139.95, you can have the Bill Ratner Voiceover Success DVD.
Somebody would be into it. Somebody would.
Bill, it's not DVDs any longer. Well, I still have 150 of them in my trunk.
Stream it from Netflix.
Yeah. You can live stream it.
Right. But a bunch of us got together and opened a voiceover lab in New York and L.A. at the Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA, at our union, and in honor of the great Don LaFontaine. The Don LaFontaine Voiceover Lab, to which union members can go for free, non-union members go for a slight fee, and study with all the stellar pros. And so we're asked, those of us who are on the advisory board are told, hey, listen, man, come teach.
Yeah.
So we do. I teach maybe half a dozen times a year in New York and LA, and as a volunteer.
Yeah.
And so actors who are into voiceovers,
I'm going to take one. It's going to be great.
You
It's
should.
going to be great.
You crack me up. She does voices on our podcast all the time, and she cracks me up. So
Thanks.
you should.
You crack me up, Naima.
Thank you, Bill.
You too, Travis. And Billy, you too.
Thanks, Dad. He's cracks everyone up.
I bet your dad's sitting there like, oh, God.
My dad's going to watch this like,
He's just going to be crying the whole time. Like, this is the best thing I've ever
Flint
seen.
from G.I. Joe said my name.
Like
My
80
name
times.
is his name.
Exactly. My name is his name, and we are the same. Oh, but Bill, thank you so much for
fun,
taking the
guys.
time and talking to us.
Great.
This was amazing.
This is the most fascinating interview I don't think we've ever done.
Yes, definitely.
And I'll tweet it out.
We shall.
So will we. We'll tweet it out. Yeah, but thank you. We appreciate it.
So wait a minute. Here's your card.
Sure.
I'm not giving it back, but I'm going to say.
Take this away from me.
Get this out of my
You
face.
have been dishonorable.
You have been dishonorable. No. You've been listening, watching, and feeling the Nerdy 30s. You've been listening to the Nerdy 30s. You've been watching the Nerdy 30s, the podcast that proves you don't have to give up what you love at any certain age. Nerdy 30s.
Oh, F, we're going to use that 50 times.
Did we just get promo?
We got promoed.
I am excited.
No, that was amazing.
I'm going to cry.
I'm going to give you a
I'm
little
gonna
bit of
cry
that.
now.
Doctor, good work.
so much.
All right.
Fun.
Bye, guys.